From the moment Adrian was born, his life was far from normal. His face wasn't just beautiful, it was dangerous. Anyone who saw it would be overwhelmed, losing their lives. To protect others and himself, Adrian had to wear a mask and live a lonely, hidden life. You might already know his story. In part 1, Adrian's mask was ripped off at his university, causing chaos. People misunderstood him and labeled him a monster. He was sent to prison for 20 years, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. While locked away, Adrian created pt2, a groundbreaking truth-detecting technology that later cleared his name. But the secret of his face, why it was so deadly, remained a mystery, even to Adrian himself. This is the story of what really happened during those 20 years and beyond. Prison was a nightmare for Adrian. His mask made him an easy target for teasing and bullying. "Think you're better than us?" one inmate sneered. "Take off the mask, pretty boy." Adrian tried to ignore them, keeping his head down, but the bullying turned physical. Groups of inmates would corner him and try to rip off his mask. Each time, they paid the price. When his mask was removed, chaos followed. Some inmates fainted, others froze in fear. Word spread quickly. Don't mess with the guy in the mask. Even so, some prisoners kept testing him. Adrian let them bully him, as long as they didn't touch his mask. He didn't fight back, not even to protect himself. But everything changed in his 5th year in prison when he got devastating news. His parents had been killed. Adrian's parents were the only people who had ever loved him unconditionally. Their deaths crushed him. For weeks, he didn't eat or speak. He was overwhelmed with grief and anger, but he refused to take it out on others. Instead, he started thinking about his curse, the deadly power of his face. He had always avoided trying to understand it, too afraid of what might happen. But now, he had no choice. He had to put an end to the bullying without causing more deaths. Adrian remembered that his mask let him show his eyes without harming anyone. What if he could reveal just a small part of his face and weaken its effects? He didn't test this theory until Abdul, a gang leader, cornered him in the bathroom with his henchmen. They wanted to humiliate him. Adrian decided to act. Slowly, he lifted his mask just enough to reveal part of his jawline. Within seconds, Abdul and his men collapsed, unconscious but alive. Adrian's plan had worked. After that day, everything changed. Adrian's ability to protect himself without taking lives earned him respect. By his 10th year, he was seen as the boss of the prison. The inmates called him the Phantom, and no one dared to challenge him. But Adrian didn't care about power. He spent his time working on pt2, sending plans to Marcus, a businessman who had shared his cell for a short time. With Marcus's help, pt2 became a worldwide success, even while Adrian remained behind bars. When he was finally released after 20 years, he was hailed as a genius. But Adrian's heart was still heavy with the pain of his past. At 38, Adrian was free, but his life was far from normal. He used his share of the pt2 profits to buy a home and hire bodyguards. Still, he was haunted by his parents' deaths and the fear his face inspired. But not everyone celebrated Adrian's freedom. Online, people debated the events of the university incident. How had those students died? Why was Adrian's face so dangerous? Among the skeptics was a man named Victor Kane, a bodyguard Adrian had unknowingly hired. Victor's cousin had been one of the students who died at the university. Fueled by a thirst for vengeance, Victor infiltrated Adrian's life, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One night, Victor made his move. He had already taken out Adrian's other bodyguards, leaving him defenseless. Adrian was about to fall asleep in his bedroom when Victor kicked down the door. "You took my cousin from me," Victor said, raising his gun. "Now you'll pay." Adrian tried to reason with him, but Victor fired. The bullet grazed Adrian's stomach. Clutching his wound, Adrian reacted instinctively, removing his mask in shock and fear of losing his life. The effect was instant. Victor froze, his anger replaced by a vacant stare. Moments later, his body convulsed, and he collapsed, lifeless. Adrian called the police before passing out. When he woke up in the hospital, he learned that Victor had died. pt2, the advanced truth-detecting technology Adrian had designed and programmed, once again proved his innocence. This groundbreaking invention, far superior to traditional lie detectors, could read human thoughts to determine truths from lies. Despite this, the public wasn't convinced. Many believed Adrian had tampered with pt2 to protect himself. Fear and outrage spread quickly. The massacre at Adrian's home reignited public fear. Social media buzzed with stories about the masked man and his supposed killing spree. Despite pt2 clearing Adrian, people demanded he be locked up. The authorities, fearing both the public's anger and Adrian's unexplained powers, decided to isolate him indefinitely. They framed it as protection for Adrian from vengeful relatives of the victims at the library, but Adrian knew the truth. They feared him too much to let him live freely. They believed isolating Adrian would reassure those who felt endangered by his presence, even if the evidence proved his innocence. Adrian returned to his cell, his mask firmly in place. He reflected on the life he'd been forced to live, always isolated, always feared, and now condemned once again without a trial or justice. Something inside him had changed, a quiet anger simmering beneath the surface. He was no longer the same man who had spent 20 years in prison, hoping he could still change the world with his mind. In fact, he was scared. He was afraid of what he was about to do. That night, alone in his cell, Adrian stood before a small mirror. His hands trembled as he reached up to the mask. Slowly, deliberately, he removed it. For the first time, he felt the cool air against his face, the unfiltered sensation of freedom. He looked into the mirror, unblinking. A faint smile crossed his lips. The mask fell to the ground.